Welcome to P3, I'm Ronald Mark. This is a show that explores the fascinating people, places, and perspectives that make up our world. On today's show, we talk Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield about how he has flown some of the fastest planes on the planet and about Canada's role in space. And later up, we meet a radio host who deals with extreme sports. He explains why people are willing to risk their lives. This is P3. Welcome to P3. When man landed on the moon in 1969, a young Chris Hadfield decided at that moment to become an astronaut. Now, more than 40 years later, he has walked in space and flown over 70 different types of aircraft. I met up with him recently at the Abbotsford International Air Show and talked about flying the first jet he's always wanted to fly, the F-86 Sabre Golden Hawk, and the 100 years of flight in Canada.
Chris, we're standing in front of an absolutely gorgeous plane, but one of the most rare planes. I haven't seen a plane like this. Explain what this plane is and what your role is.
Well, there's almost none of them flying now, but it used to be the premier airplane that Canada had. We built like 1,800 of them in Canada. They defended our country in the 50s and early 60s. And 50 years ago, Canada had been flying for 50 years. It's the 100th anniversary now. And this was the airplane that celebrated that.
We're at an air show, so there's going to be airplanes.
Well, that's good. So the Golden Hawks were formed in the late 50s to celebrate 50 years of aviation. And now, since it's 100 years, we've got one of those original airplanes. This was, in fact, a Golden Hawk training airplane, and we call it Hawk 1. And we've been celebrating 100 years of aviation at air shows all across Canada.
That's pretty exciting. Now, Chris, you have had an amazing career as a pilot. I mean, you're one of the first Canadian to walk in space. What's it like to be an astronaut? It's like you kids dream. Did you grow up dreaming to be an astronaut?
I decided to be an astronaut in 1969 when Buzz and Neil were the first two humans to walk on the moon. I decided that night I want to be an astronaut when I grew up. And I'd grown up looking at this airplane, watching the Golden Hawks fly, my first memory of aviation. So now, to be an astronaut, to have walked in space, and to be flying a Sabre, it's just unbelievable. I have to pinch myself to convince myself that I'm really getting to do these things.
I mean, obviously, before you become an astronaut, you have to become a jet pilot. You have to have all this training. You've flown in Canada. You've flown in the States on F-18s. And then you had the training. You flew the space shuttle. Is that right? Explain how that was, like moving from F-18s to space shuttle.
Well, I flew F-18s intercepting Soviets off the coast of Canada in the 80s. And then 10 years later, I was flying on a space shuttle up to Space Station Mir and being part of a Russian crew on the space station. And going from that, being able to walk in space. And even now, I'm qualified to fly the Russian spaceship, which is the Soyuz, their rocket. And it's all been one long continuum that came from the very first flight in Canada, 1909, through the Sabre, the F-18s, and now Canadians flying on the space shuttle, on the Russian Soyuz, and even Bob Thirsk with the Canadian Space Agency living up on the space station for 6 months. And all that is just the history of Canada in flight, and it's great that we're celebrating it this year all across the country.
Chris, I mean, when you think about space and the idea of traveling to space, we have a lot of research, a lot of things going on in outer space. What role do you think Canada plays currently now in the space station and other things like that in outer space?
You know, we've been really smart in how Canada has explored and used outer space. We had the third satellite on Earth in space. After the Soviets and the Americans, Canada was the third to have a satellite in space. It was to understand the upper atmosphere, Canadian atmosphere, where we're looking at the northern lights and the ionosphere. We pioneered communications because we're such a big country, being able to bounce signals back and forth. We pioneered Earth observation with understanding the North with our radar satellites, and of course we built the robots. Canadarm on the shuttle. We built the space station, Canadarm2. So we have chosen certain things where we are more expert than anyone else on the planet, and we've learned a lot, we've developed a lot, and we've made a lot of money at it as well. It's been really good for the Canadian economy.
Chris, it was really great to meet you, and I look forward to seeing you flying up in the sky, and I'll wave up at you when I see some kind of satellite or space station flying above.
I'll be
Thanks so much,
back.
Chris.
Thanks very much.
All the best.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
More P3 right after this. Welcome back to P3. Living life to the fullest is something most of us hope for. To our guest, life and career is truly an adventure. Mike Falcon is the host of The Adventure Show, which can be heard on Chorus Entertainment radio stations across Canada. Mike joins me in the studio. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you.
This is a great privilege to have you. I mean, we met in a really cool way. I'll tell the story in a minute. We met flying snowbirds. It's incredible. We'll tell that story in a little bit. But
okay.
You do this really cool show where you interview the most extreme athletes in the world. And you get this one-on-one opportunity to hear their story. Take me into some of their stories. I mean, you guys that climb Everest, guys that do free diving. Take me into a couple of these amazing stories.
Well, I think it all started with profiling the world's best personalities. That was how I got into it. It was all selfish interest, because all I wanted to do was get back into what I really had a passion for, but I wasn't quite as good as my guests.
So you want to be doing this stuff?
Yeah, for a lot of it, yeah. I tried to do a lot of it, but, you know, the guys are taking it to a whole other level now. And free diving is a perfect example.
Explain free diving. It's a great place to start.
Free diving or breath holding is a sport, and there's a number of applications to it. There's static apnea, where you lay in a pool and hold your breath for as long as you can.
My kids do that one.
Yeah, well, believe me, it's going a lot further than you can believe. Can you imagine holding your breath for 17 minutes?
There's people who can do that?
17 minutes.
Just underwater, 17 minutes.
Yep. Tom Zetas, a German free diver, has perfected that. Now, he uses oxygen beforehand and saturates for about a half an hour, and then goes out and does this type of thing. So they can
and
overcome
there's some guys that go deep into the ocean. What are those
limits
guys?
Free diving, and that's the extreme end of it. So what they do is follow a line on a sled, and they drop down into the deepest parts of the ocean. They can go as far as they can go with being able to hold their breath. So most of the dives are taking about 4 minutes. And they're now down to 214 meters.
On one breath?
On one breath. But just think about that. Think of how much pressure there is at, you know...
You're not in a suit, not nothing.
Nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. Pitch black, cold, and the pressure is just...
What's the thrill of this? I mean, these people that you interview, Mike, they are on the cutting edge of... We think adventure is like zip lining and stuff.
Yeah.
These people are on the cutting edge of what's humanly possible.
And they're taking it to where scientists, you know, they would have told you there's no physical way that you can do this to withstand those pressures or anything else. These guys are taking it so much further. They're learning how to flood their eustachian tubes. They're learning how to do all of these things. Herbert Nietzsche, the Austrian fellow who holds that record now, is actually doing a film that they're now documenting for him to do 300 meters, which is 1,000 feet.
Yeah, okay, tell me the story about, there's a local guy, at least born in Vancouver, I think it was, base jumper.
Shane McConkey.
Yes, he unfortunately has passed away recently, doing what he loves. Tell me a little bit of his story, and I know you've had a chance to chat with him.
I have, and you know, his father taught me how to ski. That was how I got into skiing, was when Jim McConkey owned the ski shop up at Whistler in the early days, back in the 60s and that.
And you love skiing. You still ski like crazy.
I live and breathe that sport. If I can get 80, 90 days in a season, I'm a happy camper.
Wow.
But Shane McConkey, just a wonderful individual, and you know, always had a passion for doing things differently. Didn't like the competitive side, but he became a world free skiing champion. Evolved out of that, and his passion became base jumping.
Which is, for the audience, that's jumping off of points like cliffs.
Something high.
And then throwing your parachute and then parachuting down on a cliff.
Yes, absolutely.
So
you jump, you dive, you get your time in, maybe 1, 2, 3 seconds of free fall, and then toss your chute, and then hopefully land safely. And actually, Shane had taken it and perfected it to where he was actually now wingsuit flying.
Now explain that, because I've seen this on YouTube. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's suits with wings and you're flying.
A flying squirrel, basically. So you jump out of a plane, and a fellow by the name of Louis Jean Albert, a Frenchman, started this. And anyway, he went to Solomon, and they perfected the suit that they could wear. And basically, you're like a flying squirrel. It's got fabric that runs from your wrist down into your hip this way, between your legs. And then what they do is they jump out, they get into flight, and then they basically stretch themselves out either like this or out front, depending on how they want to fly.
But they're still falling, but you just slow your fall down a bit.
Yeah, but the trajectory is just like a jet plane.
And I mean, I've seen some of them where they're just zipping past a cliff.
Now you got it.
A couple of feet away from a cliff.
Absolutely. And they'll follow the trajectory of that cliff along. The only thing they haven't perfected yet is how to land without a chute.
But the whole thing is crazy. Well, we're talking about some of the 4 or 5 people in the world that can do this, and Shane was one of these guys that could do that.
Absolutely. Shane has some amazing, remarkable stories, and what he was doing when at the time of his death. and I don't know quite all the details because there'll be an inquest and everything else. But I think that at the time he was perfecting, he had this thing where he'd ski off of a cliff and he'd do a double front flip. It was just very stylish, amazing. And
Click off the skis.
Yes, and he had a release that was in his hands that he could pop it, his skis would go, and my understanding is one ski came off, the other didn't. He twirled upside down and couldn't
you know, Mike, we're going to take a break in a couple minutes here, but I got to talk about the story of me and you in the snowbirds.
Oh, amazing. Was that not one that you want to get off the bucket list?
It was incredible.
I'm just like, yes.
I was in the snowbirds. Me and you were training in that thing, getting the oxygen and the whole thing. What an incredible experience. Tell me what it's like when you're up in the air, because I could see you over in the other plane.
Yeah, we were looking at each other, kind of waving back and forth. You know what? It was amazing. It's something that I've wanted to do for years and years, and so few people get a chance. In fact, we even got our coins. They say that we flew with the snowbirds.
Isn't that the coolest thing?
But I'll tell you that these guys are incredible athletes, and what amazed me the most was that they're never looking forward.
Yeah.
Takeoff, landing, or flight, they're just looking at the wingtip of the plane beside them, and that's all they see. And it's just constantly working the throttle, working the stick, and that's all they do.
I mean, these guys are elite athletes. I didn't realize. I mean, they're talking about ways to keep the oxygen and the blood in your core so it doesn't go into your legs. Make sure you don't pass out in next corner. I'm like, what? No, and you do your breathing, and I'm doing all my breathing. I don't want to pass out. It was crazy.
I think that these guys are so incredibly fit. If you're pulling, 8 positive or negative Gs, depending on whether you're drawing the blood away from the brain or you're packing it into the brain, you've got to be fit to be able to handle that kind of stuff. And, I've pulled some pretty serious Gs, and not with the snowbirds, but in another flight that I've done, and I'll tell you something, your heart's racing at 180 beats a minute, you're soaked in sweat, and you're just sitting there going...
And these guys do this all day, every day, and it's an incredible job. Mike, let's take a quick break, but there's all sorts of great questions here. Not only, we've done... I want to talk about Everest and some of these guys who, 1 in 5 guys that attempt Everest don't come back. I want to talk about some of these guys that
you have as much passion about this as I do.
This is incredible, Mike. I love having you on the show, so stick around here. More with Mike Falcon of The Adventure Show when P3 returns. Welcome back to P3. I'm again joined by Mike Falcon, host of The Adventure Show, which can be heard on Chorus Radio Network in major cities across Canada. Mike, you interview the top adventure guys and gals in the world. Some of the ones that I'm amazed at is these elite climbers that climb Everest and these kind of places. When you're talking to these people, we're talking about some of these people, 1 in 5 chance they're going to come down from Everest. What did you learn when you talk to these people?
Well, I think the guy that I have the most respect for in that business, and it is a business, when you're looking at those kind of levels, is Ed Viesturs. And Ed is the first North American to climb all 14 of the world's tallest peaks, so they're over 8,000 meters. And that includes Everest. Although Everest is getting so much traffic, I wouldn't say that Everest by any means is the toughest. K2 is probably much tougher, or Annapurna for risk of avalanches and stuff. It took 3 tries for him to get Annapurna. But he knows that getting to the top is just half the battle. You got to get home.
Right. And most people give all they can to reach the summit, and now I got to get all the way back down.
Can't do it.
Days, and you don't have the stamina.
You can't survive in the death zone above 26,000 feet, basically. So you have to be able to time it so that you're getting up there. You start by acclimatizing to the altitude, so you're going up and down, and keep going up about another 1,000 feet each time, and just slowly working your way to the top. And but some of these guys, they just they give their everything and end up living on the mountain, dead.
And that's amazing.
No way to live, by the way.
One of the things that I know people are aware of, people that are the elite athletes, they get into these zone. Whether it's the Tiger Woods or these elite athletes where they can focus and they have this mental ability. Is there a connection between what we're learning from different spiritual traditions and this ability that sport has to focus? Have you found any connection on that?
Well, personally, I live that. And, I wake up every morning and spend about 40 minutes to an hour just kind of laying there and getting in touch with what I call the, universal energy. And I sit there and just let things flow through my brain, and it calms you right out, and things happen. If you just trust yourself and let things open up, it's amazing. And
here you are. I mean, you raised Catholic, big family, altar boy, the whole bit.
Absolutely.
And yet you're saying, listen, I'm not necessarily religious in that formal sense, but I'm very open to this idea that the universe is something that is full of gratitude and love, and I need to attune myself to that.
There's no question. I think, that there's a supreme being, in my opinion. I don't know what it is, and one day I'm sure that we'll get an opportunity to go find out. In the meantime, I got lots of adventure to do. But yes, I highly believe in that, and I think that if you open yourself up, if you take time in your day to be able to kind of get centered, I think is the right word for it. But it's amazing. We take ourselves so far away from the natural way of life, and it's all been provided for us. It's just that we tend to screw it up. And I think that
we get sucked into our jobs, our career, our money, and you're saying there's life to be had.
We chase all these things that aren't important, right?
Right. But now, that's an interesting connection to what your show is. Your show is really talking about people who said, I want to go for life. I want to just have a passion and do whatever I'm going to do it all.
That's why I love interviewing these guys. It doesn't matter whether it's George Foreman or, like you say, Louis Jean Albert or any of these guys. That whatever they do, it's miraculous, it's wonderful, it's incredible, but they're living life to the fullest. Some people will say they're crazy, but you know what? Not one of them feels that they're crazy.
And even though they know that a lot of their colleagues and a lot of these people that you know and interacted have died. And you go, they're fully aware of that, but this is how they live.
Maybe they're missing a gene. They could be missing the fear factor in the gene pool.
There is a lot of science about this. Is there a risk gene about some people that have an inherited sense of wanting to take risks?
I certainly know where my levels are. I've been there.
Yeah?
I've been pushed to the edge.
What's something you wouldn't do?
Oh, well, I don't know if it's so much that I wouldn't do, but it's just things that whenever you're out there and you're doing things and you realize, hey, this is as far as I can go with it. I know that. Really? I'm not comfortable going any further, and I'm not afraid to say that that's it, and I pull the pin. But, some of these guys just take it to that next level, and I marvel by it.
Right.
And I'm impressed by it, and I have to say that it's pretty incredible.
Well, let me a couple more of these stories because I just amazed. Some of these guys that you've interacted with, things like Joe Decker. Tell me his story.
World's fittest man.
Yeah, explain that. What does that mean?
Well, and this came to me somebody emailed me and said, you got to interview this guy. It's incredible. Well, Guinness set this world's fittest man. And they set this competition out that you had to do so many things within, a 24-hour period. You have to lift so much weight. You had to run. You had to do all these things. Joe came out and won this thing. But Joe is not what you would expect. He's a big, solid 200-pound guy, and he's running the Death Valley race, which is 100 miles of
140-degree heat kind of thing. Yeah. Wow. Here you are. You're in your
mental
50s.
Strength.
I'm going to say this. You're in your mid-50s.
Yep.
And I'm looking at you. You're fit. Every time I see you, you're with some crazy shake with 15 organic ingredients in it. You are saying to people, listen, you can experience life in your 50s and 60s. What advice, what kind of encouragement will you give to people as they're moving through life?
Don't sell yourself short. Don't get caught up into what everybody's telling you how to live your life. Live your life by what you believe. Follow your heart. Do everything. It's all there for you. It's just that most of us get trapped into thinking that we've got to make money, we've got to have these things, and then suddenly once you're into that, it's very hard to break free. But if you have the courage to break out and do what you have a passion for, I guarantee you that the money will follow.
Wow, Mike, 30 seconds left. One thing on your bucket list that you got to do yet. What's your next thing you want to do adventure-wise?
Well, Everest has always been there, but I'm kind of maybe not. But you know what? I want to fly in an F-18.
F-18. Snowbirds aren't good enough.
That teased me just enough to let me know. Cold Lake, Alberta, here I come.
And that's going to happen?
Absolutely.
This year?
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm having you back after that, Mike. I can't wait, buddy. That's so great having you on the show, and it was really fun being the Snowbirds with you. It was really great. Thanks again.
Thank you, Randall, and you're an adventurer at heart.
I do.
Yourself.
I love adventure. I have a lot of passion for that too. For more on Mike Falcon and his adventures, visit his website at adventureshow.com, which also has a list of radio stations and airtimes. More P3 right after this. Welcome back to P3. Supernatural is the thrilling story of Sam and Dean Winchester, two brothers searching for their missing father, battling evil spirits along the way.
So this is Ruby, huh? She's a demon, Sam.
Her name is Lilith. He doesn't like you very much.
The Winchester brothers travel around in their 1967 Chevy Impala, investigating paranormal events and other unexplained occurrences.
She had the saintly eyes, telling me no lies, knocking me out with those American thighs, taking more than a share, had me fighting.
Many of the stories are based on folklore, myths, and urban legends, and others based on classic tales of supernatural creatures such as vampires, werewolves, and ghosts.
Did you know about Dean's deal that Lilith holds the contract?
Yes.
You got 2 months left, Dean. You're not gonna go to hell.
The brothers wrestle with questions about their destiny, uncover dark secrets of their past, and fight against the paranormal evil rising up around them.
Sick boy.
Supernatural is the story of 2 brothers fighting for justice.
Talk about a high action show. You got to check that out. If you have questions or comments and want to share it with us, drop us an email at info@p3tv.ca. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm Randall Mark.